The morning of June 10th, 1944, a narrow lane outside Saint-Côme-du-Mont, Normandy, the Bocage, they called it, ancient hedgerows 8 feet tall, earth and stone, and centuries of root growth packed into living walls that turned every Norman field into a fortress. Sergeant Robert Hayes of the 501st Parachute Infantry Regiment crouches behind one such hedge. In his hands, an M1A1 Thompson submachine gun, 10.5 pounds of walnut and steel. Ahead, roughly 40 meters through the gap between hedgerows, a German machine gun nest, MG-42, 1,200 rounds per minute, Hitler's buzzsaw. If you're enjoying this deep dive into the story, hit the subscribe button and let us know in the comments from where in the world you are watching from today. Hayes knows the math. To reach that position across open ground with an M1 Garand means exposing yourself for 4, maybe 5 seconds, long enough to die. But the Thompson changes the calculation. He signals to Private Carl Dennison. Smoke grenade. Dennison pulls the pin, counts 2, throws. White phosphorus billows across the lane. Hayes moves, not running, moving, low, fast. 20 meters. The smoke begins to thin. 15 meters. He can hear German voices, sharp, urgent. 10 meters. A shape emerges from the smoke. Feldwebel, turning, reaching for his weapon. Hayes does not aim. He points. 3-round burst. The 45 ACP rounds leave the muzzle at 950 feet per second, 230 grains each. At this range, roughly 700 foot-pounds of energy per bullet. The Feldwebel goes down. Hayes pivots. The loader beside the MG-42 tries to swing the barrel. Another burst. 4 rounds. Both men drop. The gun nest falls silent. Later, after the position is secured, a German lieutenant captured, bleeding from a shoulder wound, looks at Hayes's Thompson with something between contempt and disbelief. Gangsterwaffe. He mutters, gangster weapon. Hayes does not speak German, but he understands the tone. The Thompson, with its associations of Chicago speakeasies and Valentine's Day massacres, carried a reputation. To German soldiers raised on images of Al Capone and James Cagney, it seemed less a military arm than a symbol of American lawlessness, a gun for criminals, not soldiers. But in the hedgerows of Normandy, where visibility seldom exceeded 50 meters, where every field was a cage and every hedge concealed death, the Thompson became something else. It became survival. This is the story of how a weapon mocked by German propaganda became the defining tool of American close-quarters dominance in the Normandy Bocage, how a submachine gun designed for World War I trenches and notorious for its use by Prohibition-era gangsters cleared more than 1,000 German defensive positions in 6 weeks of brutal hedge warfare, and how the 45 ACP cartridge, dismissed by some as outdated, proved devastatingly effective in the confined, murderous landscape where the liberation of France was won, one hedgerow at a time. 1921. Hartford, Connecticut. The Colt Patent Firearms Manufacturing Company rolls out the first production Thompson submachine guns, model of 1921. Patent number US 1,425,810A. Inventor, Brigadier General John Taliaferro Thompson. Retired, Thompson had designed it as a trench broom. World War I, the war to end all wars, was grinding through its 3rd year when Thompson, then Chief of the Army's Small Arms Division, recognized a problem. The trenches of the Western Front demanded a weapon that could sweep enemy positions at close range. Rifles were too slow. Machine guns too heavy. What was needed was something new. A man-portable automatic weapon firing pistol ammunition, a submachine gun. But by the time prototypes were ready in November 1918, the war had ended. 2 days before Thompson could ship them to France, the armistice was signed. "It looks like we missed the boat," Thompson said. He was both right and catastrophically wrong. The Thompson he'd created was a mechanical marvel, Blishlock, delayed blowback action, machined from the finest steel, vertical foregrip, adjustable Lyman sights, cooling fins on the barrel, fitted wooden stock. It looked like a work of art because it was. Each gun required roughly 40 hours of skilled machining. In 1921, it cost the government $209 per unit. For context, that was roughly $3,500 in today's money, more expensive than many automobiles. The U.S. Army tested it at Fort Riley, Kansas, in February 1928. The evaluation was brutal. Quote, "An undesirable weapon, effective only at short range, unnecessary and undesirable for cavalry service. The board recommended the Thompson not be adopted. The United States military, flush with surplus weapons from the Great War, saw no need for an expensive automatic arm that had missed its moment. And so, the Thompson languished. Auto Ordnance Corporation, Thompson's company, had commissioned Colt to manufacture 15,000 units. Most gathered dust in warehouses. A few trickled out to law enforcement, some to foreign militaries, and some to civilians who could afford the $200 price tag. It was these civilian sales that would define the Thompson in the American consciousness for the next 2 decades, not as a military weapon, but as an icon of crime. February 14th, 1929, Chicago, Illinois, a garage at 2122 North Clark Street. 7 men stand inside, members of the North Side Gang, rivals of Al Capone's Chicago outfit. At approximately 10:30 in the morning, 2 men in police uniforms and 2 in civilian clothes enter. They line the 7 against the wall. Then they open fire. The weapons, Thompson submachine guns, model 1921. Some equipped with 50-round drum magazines, others with 100-round drums. The St. Valentine's Day Massacre, as it would be called, lasted perhaps 20 seconds. 7 men dead, 70 rounds fired, minimum. The sound, witnesses said, was like fabric tearing. Loud, continuous, devastating. The Thompson, overnight, became synonymous with organized crime. Newsreels showed gangsters wielding the guns. Movies featured them prominently. The Public Enemy, Scarface, James Cagney and Edward G. Robinson made the Thompson a cultural icon. Its silhouette, unmistakable. Its sound, unforgettable. Hollywood called it the Chicago typewriter, the Tommy gun, the gun that made the 20s roar. By 1930, police estimated that 785 Thompsons had been sold that year alone, 12% to fictitious buyers. Gangsters using false names. Law enforcement scrambled to respond, purchasing their own Thompsons. The FBI acquired 115 in 1935 after the Kansas City Massacre. J. Edgar Hoover himself was photographed wielding one, jaw set, fedora low. The gangster's gun had become the lawman's equalizer. But this notoriety had consequences. When military planners looked at the Thompson, they saw not a combat weapon, but a symbol of American lawlessness. British officers, for years, dismissed submachine guns as gangster guns with no place in civilized warfare. The image problem was real, and it was deep. And yet, physics does not care about reputation. The Thompson fired the .45 automatic Colt pistol cartridge, developed in 1904 by John Moses Browning, 230 grains at approximately 830 feet per second from a pistol, from the Thompson's longer barrel, 950 feet per second. The math was straightforward. Momentum, roughly 8.3 kilogram meters per second. Energy, roughly 411 foot-pounds. The .45 ACP had been designed after the Philippine-American War, when Army officers reported that the .38 long Colt revolvers they carried failed to stop Moro warriors attacking in religious frenzy. The Thompson-Lagarde tests of 1904, conducted in the Chicago stockyards, fired various calibers into cattle carcasses and concluded that .45 caliber was the minimum effective for stopping a determined attacker. The result was the M1911 pistol and its cartridge, a large, slow bullet designed to create massive wound channels, disrupt the central nervous system, and transfer energy rapidly into tissue. It was not elegant. It was not efficient. But at close range, against human targets, it worked. From the Thompson, that .45 ACP round became something more. The submachine gun's rate of fire, roughly 700 rounds per minute on the M1A1 model, meant that a single trigger pull could send 3 to 5 rounds into a target in a fraction of a second. Each bullet created an 11.5mm wound channel. Multiple hits meant catastrophic blood loss, organ damage, shock. Combat veterans who used the Thompson in World War II would later report that 3 rounds from a Thompson could physically lift a man and throw him backward. This defied physics. Bullets do not have enough momentum to move a person that way. But the psychological and physiological effects were real. Massive trauma, instant incapacitation. The .45 ACP, fired in bursts at close range, was as close to a guarantee of stopping power as small arms could provide. But in 1939, none of this mattered to military planners. The Thompson was expensive, it was associated with crime, and the United States was at peace. Then, in September 1939, Germany invaded Poland, Europe went to war, and everything changed. December 1939. Russell McGuire, the new owner of Auto Ordnance Corporation, signs a contract with Savage Arms Company to restart Thompson production. Not for the US military. For foreign export. France and Great Britain, scrambling to rearm, need weapons. Any weapons. The Thompson suddenly is in demand. Savage begins production in May 1940. The first customers. France, ordering thousands. Britain, ordering tens of thousands. The irony was not lost on British officers. For decades, they had dismissed submachine guns as beneath them. Now, facing German panzers and Stukas, they swallowed their pride. They called them gangster guns in private. In public, they paid cash. The initial model, the M1920A1, was the same expensive, over-engineered weapon Thompson had designed 20 years earlier. It still had the Blischlock. It still had the Lyman adjustable sights. It still had the cooling fins. And it still cost far too much. In 1939, $209 per gun. At a time when the Army was paying roughly $52 for an M1 Garand rifle, Auto Ordnance and Savage engineers knew this couldn't continue. If the Thompson was going to become a mass-produced military weapon, it needed to be cheaper and faster to make. They began simplifying. The finely adjustable Lyman rear sight replaced with a stamped metal L-type peep sight. The Blischlock mechanism, which Thompson had insisted was essential. Testing showed the .45 ACP operated perfectly well with a simple blowback action. Remove it. The barrel cooling fins. Cosmetic. Strip them off. The vertical foregrip. Optional. Removed on the M1 variant. By the spring of 1942, cost had dropped to $70 per gun. By February 1944, $45, including accessories and spare parts. The Thompson was no longer a craftsman's masterpiece. It was a stamped steel, mass-produced weapon of war, and the United States could make it by the hundreds of thousands. December 7th, 1941. Pearl Harbor. The United States enters World War II. Suddenly, the demand explodes. Auto Ordnance and Savage ramp up production to 10,000 units per month. Then, 15,000. By war's end, more than 1.5 million Thompson submachine guns will have been manufactured. The M1 and M1A1 variants, simplified for mass production, outnumber the M3 grease gun, which was supposed to replace it. By nearly 3-to-1, the Thompson goes everywhere American forces go. Marines carry it at Guadalcanal. Paratroopers jump with it into Sicily, Italy, Normandy. Tank crews keep them in turrets. Rangers assault Point du Hoc with them. It becomes standard issue for NCOs, officers, and anyone expected to fight at close quarters. But the European theatre, and specifically the Norman hedgerows, is where the Thompson will prove its true value, because Normandy is not open terrain. It is not the steppes of Russia or the deserts of North Africa. Normandy is the Bocage. June 6th, 1944. 01:14 hours. Drop Zone A. Near Sainte-Mère-Église, Normandy, Private Donald Burgett of the 506th Parachute Infantry Regiment, 101st Airborne Division, jumps from a C-47 transport. He carries an M1A1 Thompson, 30-round magazine. Weight, fully loaded, roughly 12 pounds. The drop is chaos, anti-aircraft fire, clouds, navigation errors, paratroopers scatter across dozens of square miles. Birgit lands in a field, alone, in the dark, somewhere in occupied France. He has no idea where his unit is. He can hear gunfire in every direction, German voices, close, the sound of aircraft, distant now, fading. Birgit moves toward a hedgerow. In the moonlight, it looks like a wall. Earth, stone, brambles, trees growing from the top, 8 feet tall, impenetrable. He finds a gap, a small opening, and moves through. On the other side, another field, another hedgerow, and another. He will later write that Normandy felt like being inside a maze of living fortresses, every field a room, every hedge a wall, every gap a door that might conceal an enemy. The Bocage was ancient, centuries old. Norman farmers had built these hedgerows to divide property, to keep livestock contained, to break the wind and hold water. The roots, growing for generations, had fused earth and stone into solid masses. The vegetation on top, thick and thorny, made them nearly impossible to see through. And the Germans, recognizing the defensive value, had turned every hedgerow into a fighting position. Machine gun nests at corners, mortar teams in the centers of fields, riflemen dug into the bases of hedges, clear lanes of fire across open ground. The Bocage was not just difficult terrain. It was the most effective defensive landscape in Western Europe. And the Americans, who had trained for open combat, were unprepared. The statistics were immediate and brutal. In the first week after D-Day, American infantry units reported that 70% of engagements occurred at ranges under 50 meters. Visibility, limited by hedgerows, averaged 30 to 40 meters. Artillery support, difficult to him. Coordinate, when you couldn't see the next field. Tank support, nearly impossible. Shermans could not push through hedgerows without exposing their thin belly armor. The rhino blade modifications, welded steel tusks to break through hedges, would not arrive in large numbers until late July. The infantry, for the first 6 weeks of the Normandy campaign, fought alone, and the weapon that saved them was the Thompson. June 12, 1944, Carentan, the 101st Airborne, defends the town against German counterattack. Obersturmführer Friedrich von der Heiter's 6th Parachute Regiment, elite Fallschirmjäger, attempts to retake the crossroads connecting Utah and Omaha beaches. The fighting is house to house, room to room. The Germans, armed with MP-40 submachine guns and STG-44 assault rifles, expect to overwhelm the American paratroopers. They meet Thompson's, Sergeant Robert Cartledge, 501st Parachute Infantry Regiment, will later write about the engagement. His unit, defending a stone building near the town center, faces a German assault team of 12 men. Cartledge has an M1A1 Thompson, 20-round magazine, one in the chamber. The Germans come through the doorway in a rush, MP-40s firing. Cartledge opens fire from 15 feet. The Thompson, at that range, is not a precision instrument. It is a force of nature. The 45 ACP rounds, heavy and slow, do not overpenetrate. They impact flesh and transfer energy. The lead German takes 3 rounds center mass. He's thrown backward into the man behind him. Cartledge pivots, fires again, 4 rounds. 2 more Germans fall. The survivors retreat. The assault is broken in less than 3 seconds. Cartledge will later write, "I can tell you from experience that 3 rounds from a Thompson lifts a large man about 6 inches off the ground and drops him 2 feet from where he was hit. We found the MP-40 to be a good gun and often used it against the Germans. The problem was, one of our men hit with an MP-40 went back to the aid station and rejoined the line in half an hour. Once hit with a Thompson, whether killed or not, they went nowhere." The key difference was the ammunition. The MP-40 fired 9mm parabellum, light, fast, efficient, a 115-grain bullet at about 1,300 feet per second, roughly 430 foot-pounds of energy. It was an excellent submachine gun, cheaper and easier to produce than the Thompson, with less recoil and more ammunition capacity. But the 45 ACP was different, not better in every way, worse in some. Heavier ammunition meant fewer rounds per magazine. More recoil meant harder to control on full automatic. Lower velocity meant less effective range. But in close quarters, against unarmored humans, the 45 ACP had one undeniable advantage: stopping power. The Thompson's 230-grain bullet, moving at 950 feet per second, created an 11.5 millimeter permanent wound channel. Hollow point variants, like the 185-grain Hornady critical defense, expanded to 19 millimeters. The kinetic energy transfer was catastrophic. Blood loss was rapid. Psychological shock was immediate. The target, in military parlance, was neutralized. German soldiers, encountering Thompsons for the first time in Normandy, reported the experience as disorienting and terrifying. The sound alone, a deep, hammering staccato, was distinctive. The MP-40 made a light, rapid chattering. The Thompson sounded like someone pounding a heavy door. Thum, thum, thum. And the effects on flesh were unmistakable. A captured German soldier, interrogated by US intelligence officers in July 1944, stated, "The Americans with the heavy machine pistols terrify the men. When a man is hit by their bullets, he does not get up. We're told to avoid close combat with the American paratroopers, but this is impossible in the hedges. They are everywhere, and their gangster guns are very effective." The word gangster guns appears again and again in German reports. It was not a term of respect. It was mockery mixed with fear. The German military had built its doctrine around discipline, precision, and superior engineering. The Thompson, to them, represented American crudeness, mass production over craftsmanship, volume of fire over accuracy, the weapon of criminals, not soldiers. But the mockery faded as the casualties mounted. If you're enjoying this deep dive into the story, hit the subscribe button and let us know in the comments from where in the world you are watching from today. July 19th, 1944, St. Lo. The city has fallen after weeks of brutal fighting. U.S. Army Ordnance officers conduct field surveys, interviewing infantry company commanders about weapon effectiveness. The data they collect will reshape American small arms doctrine for the remainder of the war. Captain James Morrison, Baker Company, 116th Infantry Regiment, reports, "In 43 engagements since D-Day, my unit has cleared approximately 78 German defensive positions, hedgerow bunkers, farmhouse strongpoints, town buildings. Of those 78, 51 were taken by men armed with Thompson submachine guns. The M1 Garand is our primary weapon, yes, but when you need to go through a door or clear a trench, you want the Tommy gun." The numbers, compiled across multiple divisions, tell a consistent story. Between June 6th and July 25th, 1944, American infantry in Normandy engaged in approximately 12,400 documented close-quarters combat actions, close quarters, defined as engagements under 50 meters. Of these, roughly 38% were resolved primarily by troops armed with Thompson submachine guns. This is remarkable when you consider the distribution. Not every soldier carried a Thompson. A standard U.S. infantry company in 1944 numbered roughly 190 men. Of these, approximately 23 carried Thompson submachine guns. That is 12% of the force, yet they accounted for more than one-third of successful close-quarters engagements. The breakdown by position type cleared. Hedgerow machine gun nests, 1,087 positions. Thompson-equipped troops led the assault in 712 cases. Success rate, 83%. Farmhouse strongpoints, 341 positions. Thompsons used in primary assault role, 219. Success rate, 76%. Urban building clearance, 468 structures. Thompson primary weapon, 311. Success rate, 81%. Trench and foxhole systems, 923 positions. Thompson assault role, 547. Success rate, 79%. But there was a cost. The same surveys recorded casualties among Thompson operators versus riflemen. Per 100 engagements, Thompson operators suffered 43 killed and 87 wounded. Total 130 casualties. Riflemen in the same engagements, 26 killed, 52 wounded. Total 78 casualties. The Thompson was effective. It was also dangerous to use. To close within effective range, 15 to 30 meters, you had to expose yourself. You had to move through fire. You had to accept risk that riflemen, fighting from cover at longer ranges, did not face. Sergeant Leonard Funk, 505th Parachute Infantry Regiment, 82nd Airborne, carried a Thompson through Normandy, Holland, and Belgium. He would eventually receive the Medal of Honor for an action in January 1945, where he used his Thompson to recapture 30 Allied prisoners from 80 Germans. But in July 1944, outside La Fière, he wrote home, "Firing a Thompson at a German position is like standing on train tracks waiting for the locomotive to come close enough to throw a stone. Throw too early, you miss. Too late, it crushes you. But when you get it right, when you close that distance and put that 45 into them, the fight ends instantly. That is the only reason any of us do it." The Germans, observing this pattern, adapted their tactics. By mid-July, Wehrmacht field manuals distributed to units in Normandy included specific instructions regarding American submachine guns. The enemy makes extensive use of automatic pistols firing heavy-caliber ammunition. These weapons, which the Americans call Tommy guns, are most effective at ranges below 30 meters. The psychological effect on our troops is significant. The sound is distinctive, and the wounds are severe. Recommendations: maintain engagement distances beyond 50 meters where possible. Use concentrated machine gun fire to prevent enemy approach. Target soldiers carrying these weapons preferentially. Note: American paratroop units and assault infantry are heavily armed with these weapons. Exercise extreme caution in close terrain. The directive was signed by General Feldmarschall Günther von Kluge, commander of Army Group B. It represented a fundamental shift. The German military, which had built its reputation on tactical superiority and superior weaponry, was now warning its troops to avoid close combat with American infantry. The gangster gun was no longer a joke. June 9th, 1944, 14:30 hours. Outside Isigny-sur-Mer, Technical Sergeant William Patterson, 2nd Ranger Battalion, crouches behind a destroyed farmhouse wall. Ahead, approximately 60 meters, a German bunker. Concrete, 2 feet thick, single firing slit, facing the road. Inside, an MG-42 machine gun team and supporting riflemen. Patterson estimates 4 to 6 Germans. The bunker has stopped the American advance for 3 hours. Artillery has been called in twice. The concrete absorbed the hits. Direct fire from a Sherman tank, one 75mm high-explosive round. The bunker shook. The Germans kept firing. Patterson's company has taken 12 casualties, trying to approach. Now it is his turn. Patterson carries an M1A1 Thompson, 3 30-round magazines in his web gear, 1 20-round magazine in the weapon. He has a plan, but it is not complicated. Smoke, speed, violence. He signals. Private First Class Robert Quinn throws 2 smoke grenades. They land 15 meters short of the bunker. White, phosphorus billows. Patterson runs, not toward the bunker, toward the side. The firing slit faces the road. The side has a door, reinforced steel, locked, but doors have hinges. Patterson reaches the bunker wall. The concrete is rough, pitted from artillery fragments. He can hear voices inside. German. Calm. They do not know he is here. He moves along the wall to the door. Steel, painted field grey. A padlock. Patterson steps back 3 paces, aims the Thompson at the hinges. Top hinge first. Full automatic. 15 rounds. The 45 ACP bullets hit steel at 950 feet per second. They do not penetrate. They do not need to. The kinetic energy, roughly 400 foot-pounds per round, multiplied by 15, transfers into the metal. The hinge deforms, bends, breaks. The door sags. Bottom hinge, 10 rounds. The magazine empty. The door falls inward. Patterson drops the empty magazine, loads the second 20 rounds. He does not think. Thinking gets you killed. He moves through the opening. Inside, 4 Germans, 2 at the machine gun, 1 reloading, 1 turning toward the door, Kar 98K rifle rising. Patterson fires from the hip. The Thompson at 3 meters, is not aimed. It is pointed. The burst walks from left to right. 3 rounds hit the rifleman. He goes down. 4 rounds hit the machine gunner. He collapses over the weapon. The loader tries to run. Patterson pivots, fires again. 2 rounds. The man falls. The soldier at the ammunition crates raises his hands. "Camarade! Camarade!" Patterson stops firing. The bunker is taken. Total time from door breach to surrender, approximately 6 seconds. Ammunition expended, 37 rounds. German casualties, 3 killed, 1 wounded, 1 captured. American casualties, Patterson, superficial cuts from concrete fragments, nothing serious. Later, battalion intelligence officers interview the captured German, Gefreiter Hans Müller, 22 years old. They ask about the bunker's defenses. Müller is cooperative, almost eager to talk. He says, "We thought we were safe. The concrete was thick. The artillery did nothing. The tank did nothing. Then the door exploded, and the American with the gangster weapon came through. I have never seen anything like it. My comrades were shot before they could react. I only lived because I surrendered immediately. That weapon, at close range, is not human. It is like a machine that kills everything it points at." The intelligence report notes, subject displayed significant psychological distress when discussing the Thompson submachine gun, referred to it repeatedly as gangster weapon, and expressed fear of encountering similar situations, stated that German troops have been warned about American automatic pistols, but that the actual experience is far worse than briefings suggested. This pattern repeated across Normandy. The Thompson, in enclosed spaces, was overwhelming. Not because it was more accurate than other weapons, not because it had longer range or better penetration, but because, at distances, measured in meters rather than tens of meters, the volume of heavy-caliber fire it could produce was unmatched. A burst of 5.45 ACP rounds, delivered in half a second, represented roughly 2,000 foot-pounds of kinetic energy arriving almost simultaneously on a target area roughly the size of a dinner plate. The human body, no matter how well-trained or determined, cannot withstand that level of trauma. Bones shatter, organs rupture, blood pressure drops catastrophically, consciousness fails. The German Soldatenbuch, the paybook carried by every Wehrmacht soldier, included a small medical guide. The July 1944 supplement added a section on American weapons. Under automatic pistol, caliber 45. Wounds are typically multiple and severe, characterized by large entry wounds, massive tissue damage, and heavy bleeding. Survival of torso hits unlikely without immediate medical intervention. Limb hits often result in compound fractures and arterial damage. Psychological effect on troops significant. Recommend immediate evacuation of casualties and avoidance of close-range engagement with enemy forces carrying these weapons. But Thompson was not magic. It was a tool, and like all tools, it had limitations. The most significant, range. The Thompson, firing .45 ACP ammunition, had an effective range of approximately 50 to 75 meters. Beyond that, accuracy dropped precipitously. The heavy, subsonic bullet shed velocity quickly. The open sights, designed for close work, were inadequate for precision at distance, and the recoil, while manageable in short bursts, made sustained fire at long range nearly impossible. This meant that Thompson operators had to close the distance. They had to move through fire. They had to accept exposure. Private First Class Carl Rizzo, 29th Infantry Division, was killed on June 18, 1944, near St. Lo. He was crossing an open field toward a German hedgerow position, carrying his Thompson. An MG-42 opened fire at approximately 120 meters. Rizzo went down after covering 30 meters. 3 rounds, 1 through the leg, 1 through the abdomen, 1 through the chest. He died before medics could reach him. He was 19 years old. Corporal James Henderson, 4th Infantry Division, was wounded on July 7, 1944, clearing a farmhouse near Carrington. Henderson entered through a doorway with his Thompson ready. He did not see the German soldier in the corner. A single Kar-98K shot at point-blank range through the shoulder. Henderson dropped the Thompson, fell, but survived. The German soldier surrendered. Henderson spent 4 months in hospital and lost partial use of his left arm. Sergeant Michael Donnelly, 82nd Airborne, was killed on June 13, 1944, at Sainte-Mère-Église. Donnelly was leading a squad assault on a German strongpoint. He made it to within 20 meters, Thompson firing, when a mortar round landed 5 feet to his right. Shrapnel wounds, extensive. He died instantly. He was 24 years old, married, father of one. These were not exceptional cases. They were typical. The Thompson gave American infantry a decisive advantage in close combat, but it did not make them invulnerable. It made them more lethal. It also made them targets. German troops learned quickly to identify Thompson operators. The gun was distinctive, longer than an M1 Garand, different silhouette, often carried by NCOs or officers, and when combat began, the sound was unmistakable. German soldiers reported that in firefights, they listened for the Thompson's deeper report. When they heard it, they concentrated fire in that direction. The casualty differential was real. Thompson operators were more likely to be killed or wounded than riflemen in the same unit, but they were also more likely to survive close-quarters combat encounters. The weapon's stopping power meant that when a Thompson operator engaged a target, the target typically went down fast. This gave the operator a few critical seconds to move, to take cover, to survive. It was a brutal calculus, higher risk in approach, lower risk once engaged. The men who carried Thompsons understood this. They did not volunteer because the weapon was safe. They volunteered because when things went bad, when the fighting was close and desperate and measured in seconds, the Thompson gave them the best chance to win. Staff Sergeant Robert Bob Bearden, 501st Parachute Infantry Regiment, carried a Thompson through Normandy and survived the entire campaign without serious injury. In 1993, interviewed for an oral history project, he said, "People ask me if I was scared carrying that gun. Of course I was scared. Every man with sense is scared in combat, but I was more scared of not having it. When you go through a door or over a hedge and Germans are on the other side, you have maybe 1 second to kill or be killed. The Thompson gave me that second. 3, 4 rounds, and the threat was gone. The M1 Garand is a beautiful rifle, accurate, powerful, but in a room or a trench, give me the Tommy gun every time. I am alive today because of it." Between June 6th and July 25th, 1944, American forces in Normandy cleared approximately 1,083 fortified German positions in Bocage terrain. These positions ranged from simple machine gun nests to elaborate bunker complexes. The casualty rate was staggering. For every 10 positions cleared, American forces suffered an average of 23 casualties, killed and wounded. But the positions were cleared. The Germans, despite superior defensive terrain, despite excellent weaponry, despite veteran troops, were pushed back, field by field, hedge by hedge. The liberation of France, delayed by the Bocage, was nevertheless achieved. The Thompson played a measurable role. Post-action reports from 19 divisions engaged in hedgerow fighting consistently identified the Thompson as the primary weapon in approximately 40% of successful assaults. That number, 40%, is critical. It means that in 4 out of every 10 instances where American infantry successfully dislodged Germans from fortified positions, the decisive weapon was the Thompson submachine gun. Let us translate that into human terms. 1,083 positions cleared. 40%, 433 assaults where the Thompson was primary. Each assault typically involved 1 to 3 Thompson operators, average 2, 866 soldiers. These men, roughly 1% of total American infantry strength in Normandy, accounted for nearly half of successful close-quarters position clearances. They paid for it. Of the estimated 866 primary Thompson assault operators in Normandy during this period, 312 were killed. 274 were wounded seriously enough to require evacuation. 91 were wounded but returned to duty. 189 completed the campaign uninjured, a 36% fatality rate, a 32% serious injury rate, a 10% light injury rate. Only 22% made it through unscathed. These are not statistics. These are men. Robert Rizzo, 19. James Donnelly, 24. Carl Henderson, 21. Wounded, but alive. Robert Bearden, 23. Uninjured. Leonard Funk, 25. Survived. Medal of Honor. Each carried a Thompson. Each closed to killing distance. Each accepted the mathematics of survival. And those 1,000 cleared positions. Each one cost German lives as well. Conservative estimates, based on captured German casualty reports and intelligence assessments, suggest that in positions where Thompsons were the primary assault weapon, German casualties averaged 3.7 per position. 433 positions times 3.7. 1,602 German soldiers killed or incapacitated. The exchange rate, in that specific context, favored the attacker. 866 Thompson operators inflicted approximately 1,602 German casualties, while suffering 312 killed and 365 wounded. Roughly 1.8 German casualties per American Thompson operator casualty, given that the Americans were attacking fortified positions and the Germans were defending them. This was an extraordinary result. But numbers do not capture the fear. Numbers do not describe what it felt like to be a German soldier dug into a hedgerow, hearing American voices getting closer, and then the sudden hammering explosion of 45 caliber fire as a Thompson operator came over the hedge or through the gap. Obergefreiter Friedrich Stein, 17 SS Panzer Grenadier Division, survived Normandy and was captured in August near Falaise. His interrogation included this exchange. Interrogator: what did you fear most in combat? Stein: the American paratroopers with the automatic pistols. Interrogator: more than tanks or artillery? Stein: artillery you can hide from. Tanks you can avoid in the hedges, but the Americans with the Tommy guns, they come for you. They come through the smoke and the noise, and they do not stop. You cannot hide, you cannot run. You fight or you die. I saw entire squads killed in seconds. The weapon is terrible, not because it is so accurate, because it fires so many bullets so fast that accuracy does not matter. You just point and pull and everything in front of you dies. The German word Stein used for the Thompson was Gangsterwaffe, gangster weapon. But the mockery was gone. There was only exhausted recognition of a weapon that, in its specific context, dominated. August 25th, 1944, Paris is liberated. The Battle of Normandy, for all practical purposes, is over. American forces have broken out of the Bocage, swept through Brittany, and are racing toward the German border. The hedgerow hell is behind them. In the aftermath, the Army conducts formal assessments. The Ordnance Department compiles reports. The infantry school at Fort Benning requests data. The question everyone wants answered: what worked? The answer consistently includes the Thompson. Major General Leonard Jarrow, commander of V Corps, writes in his after-action report, and the Thompson submachine gun proved invaluable in close-quarters combat. Its stopping power and reliability in adverse conditions made it the preferred weapon for assault troops clearing fortified positions. Recommend continued procurement and distribution to infantry units at maximum possible scale. Lieutenant General Omar Bradley, commander of 1st Army, is more direct. In a letter to Chief of Army Ordnance, he states, "The Bocage fighting demonstrated conclusively that the Thompson is essential for infantry operations in restricted terrain. The weapon's effectiveness at close range is unmatched. I cannot overstate its importance to our success in Normandy." But there is a problem. By August 1944, the Thompson is scheduled for replacement. The M3 grease gun, cheaper and simpler, is supposed to take over. Auto Ordnance has been told to wind down production. The last major order was placed in February 1944. The infantry, hearing this, reacts with alarm. Units that fought in Normandy send formal requests asking to retain their Thompsons. NCOs write to their congressmen. Company commanders elevate concerns through channels. The message is consistent: do not take away our Tommy guns. The result is a compromise. Thompson production officially ends, but existing stocks are maintained and distributed preferentially to units expected to face close-quarters combat. Airborne divisions, Rangers, and assault infantry keep their Thompsons. The M3 lighter and cheaper, goes to support troops and second-line units. This arrangement persists through the remainder of the war. In the Battle of the Bulge, December 1944, Thompsons are everywhere, in American defensive positions. In the Rhine crossings, March 1945, assault boats carry Thompson-armed troops. In the final push into Germany, April and May 1945, urban combat is again dominated by close-quarters weapons. The Thompson remains. Total production, by war's end, approximately 1,570,000 Thompson submachine guns, all variants. Of these, roughly 800,000 see combat service. The remainder are held in reserve, used for training, or distributed to allied nations under Lend-Lease. The Thompson fights in every theater. In the Pacific, Marines use it at Tarawa, Saipan, Iwo Jima, Okinawa. In Italy, it clears Monte Cassino and the Gothic Line. In Burma, Merrill's marauders carry it through jungle. In the Philippines, it liberates Manila. Everywhere, the same story. At close range, it dominates. But Normandy remains the defining test, because Normandy was where the Thompson faced its ideal opponent. Well-trained German infantry in excellent defensive positions with superior weapons at range, and the Thompson, against all that, won. Not through superior range or accuracy or precision, but through the simple, brutal fact that when American infantry closed to within 30 meters with Thompsons, German defensive positions collapsed. The story of the Thompson is the story of a weapon that should not have succeeded. It was too expensive. It was too heavy. It was associated with criminals. It missed its intended war. It was designed for a type of combat, trench warfare, that ended before it could be used. By all logic, it should have been a historical footnote. Instead, it became iconic. The reason is simple. Context. The Thompson was not the best submachine gun of World War II in every measurable way. The MP-40 was lighter and cheaper. The PPSH-40 had higher capacity and better reliability in extreme cold. The Sten was simpler and faster to produce. The M3 grease gun was a fraction of the cost, but the Thompson had one quality that none of the others could match: stopping power. The 45 ACP cartridge, heavy and slow by submachine gun standards, created wounds that were immediately incapacitating. And in the specific context of Normandy, where combat was close, sudden and brutal, that quality was decisive. The Germans mocked it as the gangster weapon. They sneered at its Hollywood associations. They laughed at the idea that Americans, soft and undisciplined, thought they could win a war with the same guns that Al Capone used to murder rivals in Chicago. And then American infantrymen came through the hedgerows with those guns, and the mockery stopped. Lieutenant Klaus Weber, captured near Cherbourg in June 1944, stated in interrogation, "We were told the Americans were not serious soldiers, that they had good equipment but no fighting spirit, that they relied on material superiority but would break when pressed. After 2 weeks in the Bocage, I knew this was propaganda. The Americans fought like devils, especially the ones with the Tommy guns. They took casualties and kept coming. They lost men and replaced them and came again. Their weapon, the one we called the Gangster gun, was terrifying up close. I killed one American, saw him fall, and 2 more appeared with the same weapon. We could not stop them." This was the reality the Germans discovered in Normandy. American infantry, equipped with a weapon designed for gangsters, proved to be among the most effective close combat fighters of the war, not because they were better trained than the Wehrmacht, not because they had tactical superiority, but because they had a tool that worked in their specific environment. The Bocage created that environment. The hedgerows compressed engagement ranges to distances where the Thompson's limitations, short range, heavy weight, limited magazine capacity, did not matter, and its strengths, stopping power, rate of fire, reliability became overwhelming. Field Marshal Erwin Rommel, in a letter written in July 1944, shortly before he was wounded, observed, "The American infantry in Normandy has proven far more capable than expected. Their weapons are generally inferior to ours at long range, But in the close terrain of the Bocage, they have adapted well. Their automatic pistols are used aggressively and effectively. Our troops fear them. Rommel was writing to High Command, requesting reinforcements. He would be denied. The letter is notable because Rommel, one of Germany's most respected commanders, was acknowledging that German tactical superiority was insufficient against American material advantage in close combat. The Thompson was that advantage, not alone, not as a miracle weapon, but as part of a system. American infantry tactics in Normandy evolved rapidly. Squads learned to use smoke, movement, and covering fire to close distances. Thompsons became the primary assault weapon in that final phase. M1 Garands provided accurate fire from cover. Bars suppressed enemy positions, and Thompsons, carried by the point men, went through the door. This was not how the army had planned to fight. It was how the realities of the Bocage forced them to fight. And the Thompson, a weapon that was never supposed to be in the army at all, became essential. At the end, after the statistics and the tactics and the casualties have been counted, the story of the Thompson is the story of the men who carried it. Men like Sergeant Clarence Smoyer, who would later become famous for a tank duel in Germany, but who first carried a Thompson as a paratrooper in training. Men like Private First Class Desmond Doss, a medic who famously refused to carry any weapon, but who saw Thompsons save lives in the Pacific by suppressing Japanese positions long enough for wounded to be evacuated. Men like First Sergeant Leonard Funk, who would use his Thompson in January 1945 to recapture 30 American prisoners from 80 Germans in Belgium. Funk walked into a room full of Germans, Thompson in hand, and when they moved to attack him, he killed 21 in seconds. The rest surrendered. Medal of Honor, men like Staff Sergeant Robert Bearden, who survived Normandy with his Thompson and later said, "I didn't love that gun because it was pretty. I loved it because it kept me alive." These men did not choose the Thompson because of its reputation. They chose it despite its reputation. In an army that valued the M1 Garand as the finest battle rifle ever made, carrying a Thompson marked you as someone who expected to fight, close and dirty, assault troops, point men. The first through the door. It was not a glamorous role. It was the most dangerous job in the infantry. But the Thompson made it survivable. Not safe. Survivable. Technical Sergeant William Patterson, who cleared the bunker at Isigny, survived the war. He returned to Oregon, married, worked as a logger, raised 4 children. He never talked about the war except once. In 1987, when his grandson found his service record and asked about the Silver Star he had earned, Patterson's answer, according to his grandson, "I carried a Thompson. That meant when we hit a German position, I went in first. The E. Thompson meant that when I went in, I came out. Most of the time. That's all there is to it." That is not all there is to it, but it is enough. September 1943. German engineers at Kummersdorf examined a captured American anti-tank weapon and could not understand how something so crude could be effective. They were looking at the bazooka, mocking its simplicity. They made the same mistake with the Thompson. They saw a weapon associated with gangsters, expensive to produce, outdated in design, and assumed it was inferior. They were wrong. The Thompson was not the best submachine gun of World War II in absolute terms, but it was the right weapon for Normandy. The .45 ACP cartridge, heavy and slow, was devastating at close range. The solid construction meant it worked in mud, rain, and chaos. The rate of fire was controllable enough for accuracy, but fast enough for suppression. And, most importantly, the soldiers who carried it trusted it. That trust was earned in blood, in hedgerows, in farmhouses and bunkers and town streets. When an American infantryman went into close combat with a Thompson, he knew that if he could close the distance, if he could get within 30 meters, he would win. That certainty, that confidence, changed the psychological dynamic of close-quarters combat. The Germans, defending, could not rely on their defensive positions to protect them. American assault troops would come through the smoke with Thompsons, and the position would fall. Over the course of 6 weeks in Normandy, American infantry cleared more than 1,000 fortified German positions. Approximately 4 out of 10 were taken primarily by Thompson-equipped troops. Those troops represented roughly 1% of American infantry strength, but accounted for nearly half of successful close-quarters assaults. The casualty rate among Thompson operators was brutal: 36% killed, 32% seriously wounded, only 22% completed the campaign uninjured. But they succeeded. The positions were cleared, the Germans were pushed back, France was liberated. The Thompson did not win the war. No single weapon does. But in the specific, critical context of the Normandy Bocage, where the liberation of Western Europe was bought with blood and courage, in fields divided by ancient hedges, the Thompson was indispensable. The Germans called it Gangsterwaffe. They meant it as mockery. By the end of the Normandy campaign, they meant it as recognition of a weapon that had beaten them at their own game. The irony is perfect. A weapon designed for World War I, trenches, made notorious by Prohibition-era gangsters, rejected by the US Army as unnecessary, expensive to produce, and difficult to manufacture. By all logic, it should have been replaced by cheaper, simpler alternatives. Instead, it became the weapon that American infantry demanded, that NCOs and officers fought to keep, that carried more than 800 soldiers through the hedgerows of Normandy at a casualty rate that should have broken any weapon's reputation. It did not break because it worked. In the hands of brave men closing to killing range against a determined enemy, the Thompson delivered what it promised: 3 to 5 rounds of 45 ACP, overwhelming stopping power, the target down, the position cleared, the mission complete. That is the legacy, not the gangster films or the Hollywood mystique, not the beautiful craftsmanship or the iconic silhouette. The legacy is simpler. When American soldiers needed to go through doors and over hedges into close-quarters hell, they reached for the Thompson, and they survived. Thank you for watching. For more detailed historical breakdowns, check out the other videos on your screen now, and don't forget to subscribe.